Namaskar, Anyang Hasanika. This is Sonu Trivedi, Director of the Swami Vivekanand Cultural Center at the Embassy of India in Seoul, with you all today for the third session of the workshop on India at 75. Friends, we all met yesterday, where we had the session on strategic autonomy and geopolitical opportunities for India and Republic of Korea by Professor Kondapalli. Today, we are amidst you to discuss about the narratives on global media and politics, particularly from Indian perspective, focusing on the role of media in Indian political landscape. Well, friends, while discussing about media and politics, we need to be aware about major debates on the press freedom in India, its corporatization, media biases and democracy, the TRP-driven news media, and various issues such as media and nationalism in India, and also the emotive value of social media impact, which is one issue I'm sure influences regions all world over. Friends, when we talk about global media and politics, we generally focus on major trends and newsmakers, major political developments influencing the world, and the complex interplay between regionally varied cultures and global trends also. Some examples could be the recent Russia-Ukraine war and varied perceptions of media coverage of the war, or for that matter, what's happening in our neighborhood in India as well, such as reporting on India-Pakistan relations, or if we take the example of the Korean example, the crisis in the Korean Peninsula and the way it has been portrayed by the global media. These are some questions on which we need to give serious thought. To answer these and carry forward the discussion today, we have a very distinguished speaker in this session from India, Professor K.G. Suresh, who is currently serving as the Vice Chancellor of Makhanlal Chaturvedi National University of Journalism and Communication in Bhopal. But before we formally begin the session, let me just make some housekeeping announcements. Friends, for asking questions, you may write them in the chat box or raise your hands virtually through participant window. If time permits, we will take your questions to be answered by Professor Suresh. The attendance link for the participants will be shared 10 minutes before the session ends. And certificate of participation will be given only to those who attend all the sessions. Friends, we are also live streaming the session, and we request you to share the link on your timeline for any future reference. You may follow us on our social media handles, which is at the rate ICC Seoul. And now over to Professor Suresh. But before that, let me briefly give his introduction. Professor K.G. Suresh is a senior journalist, columnist, educationist, socio-political commentator, and communication strategist. He is currently serving as Vice Chancellor of Makhanlal Chaturvedi National University of Journalism and Communication in Bhopal, which is Asia's first and India's oldest and largest media university. Earlier, he has served as Director General at Indian Institute of Mass Communication, which is India's premier media training institution. He was also Senior Consulting Editor with Doordarshan News, which is India's public news broadcaster. He was also founder dean at School of Modern Media, University of Petroleum and Energy Studies at Dehradun, editorial consultant and with Asianet News Network, chief political correspondent with Press Trust of India, and group media advisor to Dalmia Bharat Enterprise Limited. He is also recipient of the prestigious Ganesh Shankar Vidyarthi Award for Outstanding Contribution to Journalism by Kendriya Hindi Sansthan, Ministry of Education, Government of India. He was earlier designated as Commonwealth Youth Ambassador for Peace by Commonwealth Youth Program Asia. He is also the founder president of Global Media Education Council, the only India-driven international academic platform, and has been member of various national and international bodies, a TEDx speaker, and Henry Stewart Talks faculty. Professor Suresh had successfully completed an experiential course in public health communication with the University of Oxford, United Kingdom. A media educator since his early days, Professor Suresh has served as a visiting professor at various institutions in India and abroad, and has extensively traveled across India and the world. Sir, this was your introduction, and with this we move over to your lecture. Screen is all yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sonu Trivedi and distinguished dignitaries. This is my third visit to Seoul. Of course, this third one is in a virtual mode, but always a pleasure to be back in Seoul. Earlier, I have had the opportunity to address the Asian Broadcasting Union hosted International Cooperation Council of South Korea with regard to international broadcasting. And this was when I was senior consulting editor with Doordarshan News. And it's a great pleasure to be back in South Korea. And the previous one was when I came there to address, I was the only person from India to address the conference organized by the Washington Times in Seoul. So such a pleasure again to talk on media itself from Seoul. I congratulate the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center, its director, Dr. Sonu Trivedi, the Indian Embassy in Seoul, and the Busan University for organizing this very important series to mark Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, or 75 years of India's independence. And today, the subject given to me is global media and politics, with particular reference to India and Korea. Since most of my experience has been in India, I would like to share some thoughts because there is a time limitation. I think that what we both share, both countries share, is a commitment to democracy, which is there in South Korea, which is there in India. We both have not so friendly neighbors. We have problems, but also we have a lot of similarities in terms of culture. We belong to the same cultural roots, particularly in terms of Buddhism, or the Indic religions as they are called. There is a lot of commonality in cultural values, including strong family bonds. A lot of things unite us in terms of our cultural values. And I'm sure that institutions like Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center are doing a stellar role in promoting India's soft culture, its performing arts, its art forms, and in strengthening the bonds between the two countries. But to me, the question is that, is our media also doing the same? Somehow, while Indian media played a very important role in the country's freedom movement, independence movement, and subsequently in building a new nation post-1947, over the years, the corporatization of media has ensured that the focus has shifted from development to politics. And as a result, we are a little bit more obsessive about politics than other issues of concern to the society. It could be because when you have a corporatized media in both countries, perhaps they look at their target audience, television rating points, TRPs, as we call them in India. It is the advertisers who dominate what the consumer should consume. Almost 80% of the media revenue is generated through advertisements as against circulation. A newspaper which costs almost 30 to 40 rupees, or you can say half a dollar, is sold for 3 or 4 rupees, almost 1/10 of its cost of production. Who is paying for the rest is a question that becomes very obvious. And obviously, whosoever is paying for the cost of production is going to determine, directly or indirectly, what's going to be the content in the media. We have back home in India a very large network of public broadcasters, which is called the Doordarshan, of which I was part of, which is Prasar Bharati Corporation. While it has done a wonderful job through its huge terrestrial network, its satellite network, to reach out to the remote corners of the country, it is perhaps the only television channel which still talks about agriculture, which still talks about health, which still talks about education. But yet, when it comes to news, there are critics who say that it is dominated by government news. But the question is that, and there are people who are saying that since now we have private television channels galore, do we need a public broadcaster at all? The role of public broadcaster is not that of a private channel. The role of a public broadcaster is not just to talk about news. That is a big mistake that we often tend to make. We often identify news with narrative. We often think that news is the only thing that can impact or influence people. Whereas the public broadcaster takes these aspects of culture, performing arts, health, education, the different dimensions of life to the people at large. That is the fundamental difference. It's not just about news. News is a small segment of that overall content which is taken to the people at large, which shapes public opinion, which helps build public opinion, which preserves your local culture. Today, if Indian music and Indian performing art has survived the onslaughts of technology, I would give a good share of credit to the public broadcaster. It is institutions like All India Radio and Doordarshan which have encouraged thousands of artists, performing artists across the country, in every radio station, in every television station. They have helped in preserving our culture, nurturing our culture, in strengthening our cultural roots. So to look at media only as a platform of news would be highly unjustified. News is certainly important in a democracy. But then, what are the challenges before countries, democratic countries like India and South Korea? Apart from monopolistic media houses, cross media ownerships, we know that media has not been taking up issues of concern to the common man. The trivialization of the media is a global phenomenon. What you see is the trivialization of media. When very insignificant aspects are highlighted, promoted, debated upon, which has a little or no relevance to the larger society. Whereas important issues are ignored. And somewhere, the huge technological changes that have taken place, particularly in information technology, mobile technology, that has a democratized media content like never before. Issues which were hitherto unattended, ignored, if not suppressed by the so-called mainstream media, are today finding resonance in the social media, in the digital space. Issues of the poor, issues of education, issues of culture, which had virtually been brushed under the carpet in the so-called mainstream media because of a commercial-driven motive, wherein waterlogging due to heavy rains in the city would be the lead headline, front page story, whereas heavy flooding in the remote areas of a country as huge as India would not find a mention or a very small mention in one corner of the inner pages. That is the kind of marginalization of news that has taken place. A murder in a post locality in the national capital would hog a 4-column story. But several people, the death of several people in a remote corner of the country may not even figure in the headlines. Now that is all about our priorities. It speaks a lot about our priorities as a country. So the media has to be the voice of the voiceless. That does not mean that media in any case is expected to follow the adversarial model. The adversarial model is a colonial concept where the media necessarily has to be anti-establishment. In a democratic society, while the media has to be critical, the media has to play the role of a partner in the development process. Media has to undoubtedly highlight the atrocities, the corruption, and other shortcomings in the system. But it also has the responsibility of ensuring that the government's schemes and policies which are being implemented through the taxpayers' money is also used, utilized appropriately. So the media has a responsibility of supporting initiatives because they can have long-term implications for the country. For example, we have a mission called Swachh Bharat Mission, which is about hygiene, it is about cleanliness. While historically, traditionally, we have been a society which has put a lot of emphasis on personal hygiene. We necessarily every day have to wake up in the morning, take bath and do the rituals. But as a society, somewhere due to poverty and other factors, a lot of and lack of civic amenities. You could see garbage could be seen on the streets. In the absence of toilets, there were open defecations. But the current government under Prime Minister Modi took the initiative of ensuring that we declare every district as ODF or open defecation free, that we build toilets in every school and every college, in every village, for every household. Because it is at the root cause of a lot of dropout rate in schools. It is at the root cause of a lot of diseases. Now, I think that this such a major initiative, which has even led to production of films, important films, which even talks about popular, hugely popular films, which talks about issues like menstrual hygiene, which could never have been imagined that in a country like India, it could be discussed. In a conservative society like ours, it could be discussed. Films have been made which are being accepted by the people. So it has become a people's movement, and media has played a role in that. The media can play an important role in creating awareness, not just about government schemes and policies, in educating the people, but also in creating awareness about social evils, in creating a movement for media literacy, wherein the people are not or do not become victims of misinformation, disinformation, infodemic. It's very important. Now, let us also briefly look at, because there is, as I said, there is a paucity of time. Let us also look at the global scenario. You see, the fact today remains that even today we know very little about each other. The Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center is disseminating a lot of information about Indian soft power, Indian culture among the people of South Korea. Similarly, there are Korean institutions working in India which also do this, but they are all confined to a very limited audience. Is the media talking about it? Is the South Korean media talking about India, its culture, our cultural relations? Is the Indian media contributing to my understanding of South Korea? Or, and there comes my question about global media, are we still continuing to look at each other through the prism of the global media or through the prism of the Western media? That is the issue. That most of the developing countries, most of the Asian, African countries, South American countries, even today, when it comes to international flow of information, or what is called the international information order, it is still dominated by the West. Unless you have an AFP or a Reuters or a BBC or a CNN to report about each other. When I was working with the Press Trust of India, which is Asia's largest news agency, we worked on an exchange program called Oana Pool. And the whole idea was that we have collaborations with similar wire agencies across the globe from developing countries. So we had institutional relations with Tanjug in Yugoslavia, with IRNA in Iran, the Iran news agency, and so many other Rashtriya Samvad, RSS in Nepal. So many institutions we built so that we could exchange news about each other to our clientele or to our subscribers. Unfortunately, it did not last long. It was an idea which could have really, but the newspapers were not picking it up the way it should have been. As a result, even today, majority of the news items carried by Indian newspapers from abroad continue to be by the transnational news agencies. As a result, we are not able to look at the world from our own prisms. So I have to depend on a transnational news agency to look at South Korea or to understand South Korea. That's how most of the Indians get the information. Now, thanks to internet, today a lot of youngsters, including my own daughters, are huge fans of BTS. They watch a lot of Korean television series. They watch, they have started learning how to write a manga. They have started following Japanese serials. Now, this has happened due to internet, not due to any effort on the part of the media or the print media, the electronic media, or the news agencies of our respective countries. So information flow, when it comes to information flow, that South Korea is not just BTS. India is not just yoga. We need to understand that. There is many things beyond yoga, and there are many things beyond BTS, which we need to understand. And this is possible only when there is a healthy information exchange between the two countries. So long as we both, and I'm just giving the example of India and South Korea as examples. It could be India and Africa. It could be South Korea and any other Asian country. This flow of information is very important. And this is only possible when we have our own powerful international media networks. As I told you, I had come to South Korea, Seoul, to address the KCC meeting, the Korean Cooperation Council meeting. But the question is that beyond the borders of Korea, there are people who want to understand Korea, who want to see Korea. Last night, I was watching a video where there is an Indo-Korean couple who are teaching Hindi to their son. It was such a fascinating sight. Now, I'm sure that there are many aspects of both Korea and India about which majority of our people are oblivious. They are not aware. This is only possible when we both have strong global media networks. Americans have CNN, the British have BBC. Russia has Russia Today. China has China Central Television. France has France 24. We also have, but do they have a global audience? Do we have a news agency through which I can get to understand Korea not from a Western perspective, but an Eastern perspective, from an Indian perspective? Do you have platforms where you can understand India from an independent, unbiased, developing countries perspective, Asian perspective, an Asian prism, a South-South prism, rather than a Western prism? I am not at all against any Western platform. This is not to say that. But they come with their commercial baggages. And when they come with their commercial baggages and their political agendas, then we have a problem. And it is important that we have neutral global platforms where there is a free exchange of information without any biases, without any agendas. And that is important to herald better international cooperation and people-to-people relations, which I believe is very important. And this people-to-people relation cannot be established without understanding of each other's sensitivities, understanding of each other's culture, understanding of each other's aspirations, understanding of each other's potential, understanding of each other's strengths, needs. And this can be possible only through a free flow of information, which is so critical for a democratic society. And we both are democracies. We both are proud of our democratic values. But we have to ensure that our stand on critical issues of the world also find resonance in the global platform. What India stands for, or 1.4 billion people, every fifth human being is an Indian. What do they represent? What is their take on, or what is the take of an ordinary South Korean citizen about climate change? It is happening. Do we have a say or not? Or is it only the full, the developed, the Western countries alone will have its say? Carbon emissions, do we have a say or not? Or is it that we are paying the price for someone else's mistakes? Who will talk about these issues? And that is why there is need for a change in the global information order. Efforts are being made in India also to have a global presence, at least in the digital media, if not in the television media. And to some extent, we are successful because we produce some of the best software professionals who continue to dominate the Silicon Valley. But that's not enough. It is important that we bring about fruitful collaborations and partnerships between countries sharing same values such as India and South Korea. Because our cooperation and collaboration is important, not just for our own peoples, but also for people across the world who love and respect democratic values. We are islands of democracy. We need to come together. In a scenario where there are some countries who are trying to dominate the global discourse through their muscle power, we need to understand that we have to create a global people's movement on issues like climate change. We have to build not just an information society, but a knowledge society. That's what we need to bring for the betterment of our peoples, for their cultural advancements, for their technological and scientific advancements, for their infrastructural progress. And while we can discuss for ages on the dynamics of the global media, the capital-intensive global media, the shortcomings of the media, these are debates which have been going on since ages and which will continue for ages. Let us take some steps to actually come together and not have a via media, but to share our thoughts, our concerns, our values, and work together for a better tomorrow for our people. I'm sure this dialogue to mark 75 years of India's independence, initiated by the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center and its dynamic director, Dr. Sonu Trivedi, will certainly bring about that narrative, will certainly help in contributing to that narrative, in bringing out ideas which can shape the future of our nations. Thank you for inviting me. I hope I have not exceeded the time limit given to me. I will be happy to answer any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for your fascinating lecture and your perspective on global media and politics. Very aptly, you have summarized some of the commonalities that we have between the two countries of India and Republic of Korea. You highlighted initially upon the commitment to democracy that we have. Both the countries are focusing on it, and also the problems and challenges that we face in our neighborhood. Both countries have similar historical and cultural roots. And later, you also highlighted upon the role of media in nation building and also on the development process of the nation. Along with that, some of the major challenges that media faces, such as corporatization of media and the challenges of misinformation, and very aptly you have summarized it as infodemic. So these are some common challenges, and also in the end you have also emphasized on need for change and reforms in the global information order. So I'm sure it has been a learning experience for all of us, and I'm sure all the participants must have gained from your brilliant exposition. Before we open the floor for the live interaction with the participants, maybe they can keep the questions ready. Being the moderator, let me take this advantage of asking the first question. You have talked about how countries like India and South Korea, we are focusing on democracy, and you have highlighted upon the commitment, commitment to democratic values. But could you please also elaborate on some of the challenges, in fact, the challenges which media faces in an authoritarian regime?
Absolutely. We also had a brush with authoritarianism for a brief period of almost 2 years in 1975, when the then government imposed an emergency in the country and all provisions of the constitution were suspended. Journalists and politicians were put behind the bars. But the authoritarian regimes, and I do not want to specifically name them, we are all aware of what is happening in Asia itself, is as a result of the expansionist policies, we see authoritarian regimes. Yesterday itself, there was a report which talked about how an entire people in a geographical region were being suppressed by an authoritarian regime in our region. And the whole idea is that how to suppress information from coming out of those areas. We were in a total blackout about certain countries during the COVID. We did not know what was happening in those countries because there was an iron curtain which separated us from them. So, we do not even know the fate of journalists working there, except that we keep hearing about how they are suppressed, jailed, and even sentenced to death. We have seen how hired assassins were, hired to kill certain critics of certain dictatorships in Central Asia, in Middle East. We have seen that also. So we see, but the digital media, which is not easy to control technologically, is playing a very important role in creating awareness about such regimes, what is happening to activists, democracy activists in these countries, how the fundamental rights of the people, the international human rights are being violated blatantly by some of these regimes. These are all coming out, and there is a global concern about them. And some of these countries are being isolated also because they are promoting terrorism. They are promoting, proxy war in their neighborhood. So these are happening. But that's not enough. I think that, as I said, it's only a global media network which can highlight. You see, the problem is that, Dr. Trivedi, is that unfortunately in the Western media, with all due respect, I must say that, they have often tend to take a one-sided view. If you look at, for example, the BBC has a different take when it comes to other countries. But when it came to the Falklands War between the United Kingdom and Argentina, the BBC openly took the side of the United Kingdom. So while they talk about, so it's important that, you cannot, for example, terrorism is terrorism. It cannot be freedom struggle. For some, if it is an act of terror, it has to be an act of terror. But when it comes to these things, I often find the so-called transnational media quite lacking in commitment and using their power, their reach as a tool to promote their agenda rather than report facts. And that is why there is a need to promote our own international platforms which can reach out and bring out those perspectives which are hitherto, which have been hitherto suppressed or not brought before us.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Moving ahead, I can also see Professor Sunjun Lee on the screen. Professor Sunjun Lee is he's Professor of Economics at Busan University of Foreign Studies and also Honorary Director of India Center. They are our partners for organizing this workshop. May I request Professor Lee, if you have a comment to make?
Anyway, thank you so much for your excellent presentation. And I'm agree the opinion, and also I'm really curious about the media. India media. I want to see the India drama, movie, and films, but I cannot watch it in Korea. So I'm really miss those things. Always I think, how we can do make the what I want how we can watch the Indian movie in Korea. Also, Korean film or movies or dramas can be streaming in India, but we cannot see it. So I in pretty near future, I really want to we can make it something about can watching those things, but I don't know. I'm not the expert about those field, but I'm even though we needed so many Indian dramas, films, because if you have the communication or information sectors come to the Korea, then Indian peoples also can and stay in Korea too. In Korea, long time ago, the Korea government, we discussed how India people come to the Korea because we need the Indian people who are expert in the IT or something like that. So we need the Indian people for our technology part, and also we need for the space field or with a lot of fields that we need. Even though they cannot come because of two things. One is the education, another one is there is no broadcasting for India, or broadcasting system for the India people. Though at the time we are trying to set up some systems, but we cannot do that. So still we cannot. Even lately, even we haven't discussed about that things. So I'm really curious what happened to those fields.
Well, I thank you, Professor. I totally agree with you that there is a great demand, at least in India, I can tell you, particularly Indian teenagers are just crazy about Korean music and Korean drama. I mean, so they just love it and they watch it with English subtitles, and I'm sure that, in India too, there are people that when I came to Seoul for the Korean Cooperation Council meeting, KCC, I remember I even met people from Thailand who told me that, many people in Thailand want to watch Indian serials and they are dubbing Indian serials in Thai language. I'm sure that, Indian films would be equally popular in South Korea if they are dubbed in Korean language, because of the strong cultural bonds between the two countries. I think at the grassroots level, we need to talk about it. Korean Automobile manufacturers are hugely popular in India, from Hyundai to you name it. They are all in Indian roads. You will see most of these Indian South Korean, original South Korean cars. You would find them of South Korean origin. And so there is a lot of goodwill among the people of India towards South Korea. They look at South Korea as an Asian country which has succeeded, which has become a huge success. So they are very, very, they admire, the common Indian admires South Korea. And I think that it's important that we share more information at the popular level, through the mass media, mass communication. And we will be, I can only, assure you at the Busan University and Dr. Sonu Trivedi that my university, which is located in the heart of India, we are Asia's first and India's largest media university, located in the beautiful lake city of Bhopal, in central India. We will be happy to work in close cooperation with you. Now, under the National Education Policy, the Government of India is promoting, collaborations between universities, international. So we would be happy to have your students in Bhopal and our students in Busan, and maybe Dr. Trivedi can help us in working out those modalities. We will be happy. We need more student exchanges. We need more, cultural exchanges, cultural troops. They can be part of. They should not just go to the big cities. In fact, they should go to, the interiors of the country also. That's very important, because that's where the real India is.
Thank you, Professor K.G. Suresh, for your response. I see Ms. Karuna Purohit. Ms. Karuna Purohit, can we have you on the screen?
Hello, Kumar sir, Trivedi ma'am, namaste. Annagasti, Leo sir, Lisa. I'm from Bhopal also. It's really city of lakes, as you can heard from Kumar sir. It is a very beautiful city. I just want to say the same thing which Suresh sir said, that what we came to know about Korea is only from the serials which we or our children saw. We are not having any other mode of information. Hello, am I audible?
Yes,
yes,
please.
So we don't have any other authentic mode to know more about Korean society and Korean people. Just like you are saying that there should be more programs for students, so that Korean students can come to India or to the some you can say the smaller cities, to the interior of India, and same Indian students can also go to Korea to study and to know more about. But there are more people other than students that are really want to know about Korea. Even me, myself, is very much interested, but I don't know how I can uh, get those ways to get connect with the people of Korea or society of Korea. So I like to request authorities of both the sides that please find a way so that we can interact with each other. I think that as I'm saying, I got an opportunity of this platform. Many people in India and in Korea are waiting for such a platform where we can interact with each other and in a positive and with some authentic way. So I like to request both the authorities to please do something better.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
That's all.
Maybe briefly, I can just respond to what Ms. Karuna had to say. So far as the information about Korea is concerned in India, actually, we are the Indian Cultural Center, and our domain, our mandate is to give out information about India and Korea. And so far as information about Korea in India is concerned, we have Korean Cultural Center. And let me tell you that we have around 6 branches. Korean Cultural Center has 6 branches spread out throughout India. So wherever you are, like in different cities, you can reach out to these cultural centers. And they are doing a lot of activities, not only cultural activities, but activities related to language. So the Korean language is quite popular these days in India, and their batches are they get all their batches these days. These days they are also conducting online batches, and also Korean government has launched several scholarships, which is if you contact the Korean embassy, you'll get information about those Korean scholarships that you have. And for other activities, maybe Korean Cultural Center in different cities that you have one at New Delhi, the other is at Chennai. Recently, they have opened a branch in Imphal. They also have a branch in Patna. So these branches, I think if you can get in touch, they are doing a lot of activities, and certainly a platform where you can get more and more information about Korea. And adding to what Professor KG Suresh had to say, so far as the collaborations are concerned, certainly would be happy to work out if it and Professor Lee is also here. Maybe we can take this conversation forward later on one-to-one basis, and we'll be happy if maybe both the universities, if they are able to sign some MOU for exchange of students and also exchange of faculties, because every year I see students from Indian Studies. Professor Sunchul Lee is a faculty at Department of Indian Studies. So students from Indian Studies, every year they are going to Jawaharlal Nehru University. Some of them are also going to, there is another Indian Studies department at Hankook University in Seoul. So they also have collaboration with Central University of Jharkhand. So similarly, we can try to explore these collaborations. This was what I had to say from my side. Do we have, if we don't have other questions, then maybe we can just wind off the discussion. I don't see any hand. There is a question in the chat box. Maybe let me take this last question. What do you have to say about the emotive value of social media impact, especially when you talk about the young generation, and mostly they are on social media, and the reach of social media is quite fast and vast also. So and they have this emotional connect. So Professor Suresh, if you can connect, elaborate on this emotive value of social media impact.
Well, absolutely. You know, social media has both its advantages and disadvantages. It has a flip side also. Let us not forget that if on the one hand, social media is a democratized media in terms of content, in terms of technology, to the extent that today we don't need a via media of a mainstream media to reach out to thousands of people. With a click of a button, I can reach thousands of people across the world through my Facebook, through my Twitter, through my Instagram, through my LinkedIn, through my YouTube, I can reach. But on the other hand, it is also important to understand that there are a lot of negative forces which are also there, which are scouting for recruits. Organizations like ISIS or IS, they are all engaged in recruiting youngsters, misguiding them, misleading them. They are propagating vicious propaganda, hatred through these platforms and trying to lure young people to terrorism. There are also instances of cyber pornography, cyber bullying, which is also being promoted by the antisocial elements through the social media. So it's important to ensure that there is media literacy. Media literacy is about knowing the nuances and dynamics of social media, or for that matter, the entire media. We should not get carried away. We should not get misguided. We should be aware that many of these platforms, many of these handles, we have, even during the farmers' protests in India, it was found that several handles, social media handles, were being operated from across the border. And they were trying to create a resentment against the government, within India. So there are also a lot of, today, it has become an integrated tool of war or psychological warfare by countries. So are our teenagers, are our youth, are they vulnerable to these things? Or have we equipped them enough to understand the pitfalls of digital media, of social media? So sometimes, if the emotion is in the right direction, then certainly yes. But if an emotion has been orchestrated, if an emotion has been strategized and planned, then it can have a lot of negative outcomes also. Yes, when we hear about somebody needing blood, somebody needing money, somebody needing, so it touches an emotional chord. Same about cultural, sensitivity. We see people making comments on religion, hurting others' sentiments. Same with food habits. I think that social media can be effectively used to build bonds rather than create divisions. And it is in that direction that we should be working at.
Yeah. Let me just take one last question from the chat box. There's a question about the inward-looking media. What do you have to say about this? When we talk about countries like India, I'm just elaborating on this question, maybe adding my perspective also. For example, when you talk about India, we have like Doordarshan, but along with that, we have so many private channels. So what do you have to, it's very difficult in a democratic country to for a general audience to have a balance, whether they should watch Doordarshan or the private channels. And even in private channels, there are so many options. And also, when we look into the inward-looking media, so how will a common citizen make a difference?
I agree. You see, because often you find that there is one news item around which the entire day, the whole day, you just watch the same news item. I think it is media's responsibility to educate and inform the people about what is happening in the world, particularly with the state level language media. I find it more, rather than the English and Hindi media at the national level. In India, at least, I feel that I am not very much cued into the South Korean media. But there also, from whatever I saw during my stay in the hostel, in the hotel, I felt that even there, we are so much obsessed with what is happening domestically that we don't look at the world. Can we, or any country for that matter, survive without the rest of the world? So I think that we are all now global citizens. We travel, we ideate, we integrate, we work with them through the internet, we socialize with them on the internet. So we need to know about each other better today. It is a much more inclusive world. Let us not try to make it exclusive. It is important for media also not to look, only inwardly, but also outwardly, because only then can we build an inclusive world wherein we know not just about the big. We come to know if there is an accident, if there is a crime, if there is a shooting in the United States, we will come to know about it immediately. But the positive things that are happening in those countries should also be highlighted, because only then we would be inspired to learn from each other. I am talking about that exchange, where the good things happening in South Korea is known to the people of India, and the good things happening in India, that India is not just a land of, forest, animals, snakes, snake charmers, superstitions. India has its own core strengths. It has a lot of creativity, innovativeness. And I'm sure today that trend is happening. There is this former director of the United Nations Environmental Program, Eric Solheim. You will see him at least tweeting one thing about India every day. Now, that is a global outlook. If I am only talking about my city, my country, my village, that is also important. But if I am not looking beyond, please remember, Sonuji, I will conclude with our age-old concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which is the whole universe is one family. We are not just looking at, in the age of internet, there is this concept of global village. But in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, we are not in one village. We are all in one family. And this universe includes not just human beings. It also includes plants and trees. It also includes animals. It includes birds. It includes every living thing. And everything in India has a divine context. We worship trees. We worship animals. So we look at everything as sacred. So we need to have this outlook towards our fellow human beings across the globe, rather than remaining inwardly looking and remaining exclusive.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Now let us end on this wonderful note, and the way you have concluded. Let us let us conclude the major takeaway as your last words. We can take that as the focus on responsible and inclusive media, and also having the global outlook. So thank you, Professor K.G. Suresh, for your brilliant lecture, and also taking up all the questions and responding to the comments that we had, being so generous with the time. We have we've had discussion for more than an hour. Many thanks for joining this very important session, and I hope whatever we have discussed, maybe on a one-to-one basis, maybe we'll be able to take it forward. And also special thanks to all the participants for your participation in this third very important session. Hope to see you all again on Monday, on 5th of September, when we have our fourth session, which is focused on the theme of economic diplomacy as a factor in India-Republic of Korea ties. And the lecture would be given by Professor Sun Chun Lee, who is Professor of Economics, and he's also teaching Indian Business and Economics at Busan University of Foreign Studies. Hope to see you all again on Monday. Till then, stay tuned to our social media handles. Thank you all. Thank you. Kamsahamnida.